Welcome to the LinkedIn Famous Podcast, the show where we get real about what it takes to build a personal brand on LinkedIn that gets real business results. We're talking about driving revenue from a personal LinkedIn profile by sharing real and authentic stories and points of view. I am Brad Zomick, your host and the founder of Spectrumer, a personal brand consultancy that helps founders and executives get LinkedIn famous. Join me for unfiltered conversations from the trenches of LinkedIn. We'll meet CEOs, go-to-market executives, subject matter experts, and company employees with blockbuster LinkedIn results. We'll unpack strategy and leave you with tactical advice to grow your personal brand and demand for your company's products and services. All right, LinkedIn hustlers, it's time to level up. Welcome, LinkedIn movers and makers. Today we have a delightful founder creator joining us. She is a seasoned marketing executive, a force of nature, and serial podcaster. We all know that in B2B these days, LinkedIn is a primary distribution point for podcasts. Many of you may know her from her previous company. She founded Casted, which is all about podcasting, the podcasting amplification and measurement platform. She's a three-time founder and currently the CEO and founder of Human Brands Win. If you couldn't guess yet, our guest is Lindsay Tjepkema, the queen of B2B. But before we turn the mic over to Lindsay, I thought we could dig into her background a little bit. She started her career at a nonprofit. Her first role out of college, she made the Michigan 40 Under 40. Over the years, she's had in-house leadership roles in marketing at agencies, IT solutions, and software companies. She's done just about everything you can think of under the sun in marketing, but the red thread through her career is content, branding strategy, communications. Along the way, she founded her own agency, Blueprint Marketing, and operated that for a 5-year stretch. It was a 6-figure business. During that time, the firm was retained to write a couple of research papers for LinkedIn on the B2B buying technology process. So I'm sure that informed kind of some marketing strategy and maybe even where she took things with her personal branding. Then she moved back in-house to Marcis, where she was the global VP of brand. She had a 7-figure budget and ran a global team with a couple of dozen people, and at one point, the BDR team. That was where she started her first podcast and inspired what would soon become Casted. And she must have been doing something right while she was at Marcis. Shortly after she left, Marcis was bought by SAP for almost $1 billion. Back to her love of podcasting. Following her intuition that podcasting was going to be huge, she founded Casting to be a platform to amplify, distribute, and measure podcast marketing, which is notoriously hard to measure. And she raised $10 million in venture funding to fuel Casted's growth. She also created a category and a movement around it, amplified marketing. She served brands like IBM, Salesforce, HubSpot, Drift, ZoomInfo, Gong, the hottest names in software. The business did 7 figures in revenue. During her work for Casted, she earned yet another 40 Under 40 award, this time from Indiana. Is it too late for one more? No surprise, she's a fierce advocate for the podcasting medium. In my research, I found that she did a podcast, Why Everyone Should Have a Podcast. And she's recorded well over 300 podcasts. And after 5 years recently, Lindsay stepped down from Casted and started her latest venture, Human Brands Win, where she does advisory, consulting, and speaking. The focal point of that work is B2B brand growth by prioritizing creativity, content, and authentic human connection. She's a frequent contributor to Forbes, an entrepreneur, a member of Endeavor Entrepreneur and Founder Collective. And hot off the press, she was recently anointed the co-chair of Woman in Pavilion. Lindsay has 20,000 followers. She's active on LinkedIn, which has served her well in growing not only her personal brand, but her career and her startups. She truly demonstrates what it means to be LinkedIn famous and all that comes along with that. Let's welcome Lindsay Tjepkema to the podcast.
Wow. My goodness, Brad. You found all that out from LinkedIn, huh?
And perplexed.
Man, oh man. I'm gonna use that as my intro like everywhere I go. I'm like, hi, I'm Lindsay, and I'm just gonna share that. Good.
Yeah, you have that soundbite forever now. You can give it anytime you're presenting. You can be like, "Can you do this?"
Yeah, just put some music behind it, and That's all I'll ever need.
Is there anything else in your background that you might want to double click on?
Goodness, I don't know what possibly else could be in there that you didn't cover. I'm a mom. I'm a mom to 3 amazing dudes who they and their dad are my favorite people in the whole wide world. And that's a big part of the story too. So
that sounds like you got 3 more startups there.
Yeah.
I think 4 if you start the relationship with your spouse. So
yes,
that needs some TLC too.
Yeah.
You beat me to the punch a little bit because I always like to ask, the next question I like to ask is, tell us something that the audience couldn't learn about you from your LinkedIn profile. Is there anything else you want to pull back the curtain?
Yeah, I talk a lot about my kids and I share pictures and stuff. One thing that I don't think I've really talked about, but I think I will, I see it in my future. My oldest is super duper into flight and aviation. And instead of going the like travel sports route like a lot of parents do, he's actually in flight school. So something that people probably don't know is that a few weeks ago, I actually was in a plane, a very tiny plane, with my kid, the instructor, and me, and my son was flying the plane. So if you haven't done that yet, it's a whole different, I think I burned a few years off of my life, but it was very cool.
And how old is your son?
He's 13, almost 14.
Wow, that's interesting.
Going on 60, like he is an adult in a teenager's body. So
a 14-year-old can fly a plane before they can drive a car.
Yeah.
That's scary. That is scary.
Yes. Yeah. It's like you can't overthink it. Like I just had to be in the plane. This is a lovely experience and not at all terrifying. So.
Hey, if you can do that, you can do anything.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So let's get into your LinkedIn journey. I'm curious, at what point in all that cool stuff that we just talked about did you start investing in LinkedIn, and what was the motivation and inspiration doing that?
I'd have to look at the actual number since date, but it was early. It was 2003, 2005, somewhere around there. I graduated from college in 2005, and somewhere in there, this LinkedIn thing came along, and I just started, especially I think being in marketing and content and a young professional, it just seemed natural to me. I was a big fan of LinkedIn really early on, and then as you mentioned, it was maybe about 10 years later that I had been a big LinkedIn fan. I had been investing in it, not the way that people invest in it today. It wasn't, personal brand wasn't a thing. It's just, I don't know, just sharing things and promoting things and connecting with people. I always saw it as a great way to connect with people. But then I had an opportunity to actually do work for LinkedIn as a client. And that was just the super most full circle moment ever, doing research about marketing technology buying committee for LinkedIn as a client and writing a research thing about that was very cool. I would say pretty early on, 2005 to 2015 was really when I became a LinkedIn fangirl. It's been a while.
When did you start? It changed at one point. It used to be much more like Twitter. Then all of a sudden people were, let's gather around the fire and tell a story. People telling stories, doling out advice, or this video too. At what point did you do that? And was there a mind shift that came along with that?
Let's see. From day one, I saw it as a way to connect with people. I would go to a networking thing, or back in the day when I was a young professional, I would go to a young professional event and I would find people and I'd be like, let's connect on LinkedIn. And I would connect with people. And so that's how I saw it early on. And then I also leverage those connections as real connections. Hey, remember we saw each other at that event. I thought of you because somebody's hiring this person. And I think that just grew organically, connecting with people. And then as you, just like in the real life world, you share stories with those people. You share experiences with those people. Day one on the new job, here's how it went. You share it with your people. And a lot of my people at that point, because I had been in LinkedIn for so long, were on LinkedIn. And so I think it just naturally grew and grew more. And you're so right. At some point, and I wish I knew when it was, that storytelling and story sharing turned into this gaming of the system. And I had been doing the storytelling and story sharing and actually connecting with people for so long that I was like, I just literally can't with the gaming of the system. I'm going to keep showing up, doing what I've always done, maybe taking tips of things that feel right and feel good for actually connecting with people. But to me, it's always been about the story, and it's always been about building relationships.
I love that it just seamless integration of what it is, a social platform with life. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I think also, probably like lots of other people, I've worked with people around the world. Like my job has been B2B marketing. I've worked for global companies. And so some of my closest work friends, my closest work colleagues and people who I've met at events have been around the world and certainly across the country. And so LinkedIn has been a really great way for me to keep in touch and to go back and be like, literally, I kid you not, this morning, someone that I worked with at LinkedIn, who was working at LinkedIn when I was doing the marketing research content, reached out to me today because of the announcement at Pavilion to reconnect. And we haven't spoken in 15 years or 10 years. And that was because of LinkedIn. Like, that's how it should work. It's not about gaming a system. It's about building and maintaining relationships and sharing experiences, to me.
For a lot of people who are trying to build a business, they do think of it as a game and a strategy to grow awareness and eventually pipeline. But at the end of the day, there's on two sides of that coin, there's two people when you're trying to make a connection. And I can't agree more. And I'm curious, when you started Casted and all of a sudden you had a pipeline and revenue remit, did that change? Did you have a system in place to really, when you're creating a movement, you got to beat the drum, right?
Yeah.
And say that message over and over again, find different ways to say that same message without being boring and repetitive. And I think, again, you're in that position today where as a consultant and advisor, you need to hunt and gather. When things evolved to that point, what did it look like? And how do you make the sausage?
Again, to me, I can honestly say wholeheartedly that it has never been a game. I don't see it that way. I don't see any growth hacks. I just don't play that way. I just don't think that way. Anytime I see commentary about that, I'm like, ooh, it would be like, I always think of LinkedIn and things like this as, these are, like you said, real people. This is me. I'm a real person, and my whole network and anybody who sees anything that I create are real human beings. What if I walked into a room full of people at a party with a hidden agenda and a game and was like seeing all of my connections with everyone in the room as a means to an end? I wouldn't want to do that, and I wouldn't want to be the people on the receiving end of that. So I always approach anything as building relationships. But yes, you're also talking to a content marketer who started content marketing back before it was called content marketing. It was like creative marketing and brand building. Yeah. And so to me, you can be strategic about what you're sharing, how you're sharing it, how often you're sharing it, what repetition looks like when you're sharing it. It's really easy as a founder to have things just happen and to be moving so fast that you forget to pause and share, to think about the through line of the entire story, to constantly share your why and to get people behind you as opposed to constantly looking just in front of you that you're trying to grab people in. And I think that's the difference. That's actually what I try to help people do now, is say your why as a founder is probably the most important thing for many years after you start the company. As long as you're constantly thinking of that passion, that fire, that why, and sharing that energy, not as a means to an end of generating conversions and pipeline, but of building relationships, it's playing the long game. And it's like, if there's any game to be played, it's the long game of building relationship, gaining buy-in, gaining trust, so that when people see you posting, they say, oh, wow, I wonder what Lindsay's doing. That seems really cool. Oh, wow, I would really like to check out this product she's talking about, as opposed to trying to get in front of more people, trying to break through the noise with the right colors, the right, words. And to me, one thing I'm talking about a lot lately is it's not about doing what other people are doing. It's about thinking the way the most legendary people and businesses think and applying that to your own relationship building strategy.
In the software space where there's venture funding, founders, they started this company with a mission to do things differently, to solve a pain and a problem and bring the future forward. I like that point of view. Actually, I'd love to dig in deeper. You reference your client work a little bit, and I'm sure you modeled off the way you've done things and you did things at Casted. You mentioned figuring out the why. Where do you go from there? What are the things you guide them through to take this more human approach, an authentic approach on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So I guess in summary, what I'm doing now is I'm doing a lot of speaking. I'm doing a lot of talking and working with brands of B2B businesses and their founders to identify the stories that only they can tell, right? So the things that are unique to them as people and as businesses, finding those threads. You said the red thread. I love Tamsin Webster. It's you're speaking my language there. And identifying those threads, identifying those through lines, and tying them to business growth opportunities. So that's what I'm doing, is saying, hey, Brad, what are the stories that only you can tell? What's your why? What are your experiences? And then how do we not tell them for the sake of telling them, but tell them for the sake of making connections with people in the audience that you're trying to reach so that your business can actually grow? Because that's not a new idea. That's how business has worked for a very long time, is, hey, I want to solve this problem. I want to tell people how I can solve this problem and why I'm solving this problem and why I'm uniquely positioned to solve this problem. The more people I can tell that to and build relationships with, the more successful I'm going to be and the more successful they're going to be. And so you go back to that basic premise of, how am I uniquely positioned to do this? What stories can I tell in places like LinkedIn with a pool of followers who are interested in hearing what I have to say? How can I build relationships in that direction? That's what I'm doing.
That's fantastic. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about your love affair with podcasting. And similar to LinkedIn, as a personal brand, podcasting is similar. These brand initiatives are like a train. Once you start that train, you just got to keep on going, right? And keep that train on the tracks and don't miss a stop. The podcast is also the container for a lot of those stories. I want to explore that crossover of podcasts with being human, but also we talk about measurement. One of the points that you can measure is the distribution through LinkedIn. It seems like these days a very big piece of podcasting is distribution through LinkedIn. What are your thoughts on there?
Yeah, I think in short, podcasting and why it's been so near and dear to my heart for, coming up on 10 years, which is crazy. It's been so important to me for so long, especially in B2B, is because we were just talking about relationships and how that's super important to me. Podcasting and video podcasting helps build relationships en masse. There's this research that came out right when we were starting Casted, so it's pretty old now, but it's still pretty relevant. It was done by BBC, 2019, I think, 2018, 2019, where there was a study about the effectiveness of podcasting in brands and about the things that we're all trying to do, which is raise brand awareness and brand recall and brand affinity, like all of these things that we're going for. And this study showed massive increases in all of these numbers that we're trying to reach through podcasting, because something happens cognitively when you join in on a conversation that two people are having. You join this like intimate, kind of vulnerable conversation and you feel like you're part of it, right? So it's just you and I talking right now, but everyone who's watching or listening has this connection with us because they hear us talking, having a conversation, which is much different than other marketing tactics, which are great, but reading a blog post, reading an article, reading social media posts, it's just different. So we are actually able to create a relationship with many people by investing in this one conversation. So to me, it's a no-brainer for brands that are trying to build relationships with their audiences, which is everybody.
That is so true. Think about a couple of things as you were articulating that. Number one, I remember the first podcast that I used to listen to when I first got to the startup world. And
ooh, what was it?
Yeah, the first that I can remember. Yeah. I was just getting into content marketing at the rise of inbound. I started my marketing career later, and we're at a similar stage in life. I did other things first. But I really enjoyed Pat Flynn and John Lee Dumas. They were more entrepreneurial podcasts. John Lee Dumas always used to say you're the combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah,
when listening to John and Pat, I always feel like they were like my best friends. If I saw them at a conference, like I would go up there and shake their hand and be like, I love you, man. The medium is just conducive to what I'll say is warm fuzzies. When you think about where things have gone with SEO and content marketing, we talk about gaming the system. Those and another one, cold email, right? those mediums are devoid of warm fuzzies and personality, right?
And we're talking about LinkedIn, cold DM, like LinkedIn messages that it's like, thanks for accepting my request. Do you want to buy my stuff?
The pitch slap. You said it so well about podcasting, and that's why it's so successful. It's no surprise that the downfall of SEO, right? It's actually too easy to game. Like, brands can copy each other. Same with cold email messaging. It's text that can be ripped. And in fact, I had an interesting conversation with Chris Walker, who is early to video. The main reason he got into video wasn't branding, is because people were stealing his content and reposting it.
Yeah.
And
so now with AI, it's like easy. It's so easy, and it's easy to do it on accident because AI just pulls from what already exists. So it's it's the repetition and just saturation of what already exists is just getting worse.
So audio and video they're not only more authentic, but they're unique. There's no way that any LLM could simulate this conversation that we're having.
Yeah. Even if they can, which already exists, they can deep fake our faces and repeat our voices because we're saying things that don't exist yet. You're right. There's literally no way for any model to pull from any pool of language or text that already exists because this doesn't exist yet. We're creating brand new content right now, at least, that's irreplicable.
We're making magic here, folks.
All we have to do is be human beings. Go figure.
Yeah. I've done a couple of podcasts, and actually one of my early podcasts back in 2014 or 15 was top 5% iTunes. Now it would be impossible to get maybe an accolade that's meaningless now. but and that was like a 5-day-a-week podcast on careers and whatnot. Back then, it was just all about the downloads. Today, measurement has changed, and this was also a B2C thing, so the downloads mattered almost more than the other things. We had it on a blog post, but we weren't tracking it as comprehensively as people do today. I'm curious what your thoughts are on distribution and the almost proliferation of distribution of what was just an audio form to now video, to now cutting it up into social bites, and how brands distribute and measure. And what's your mindset?
Okay, distribution first. I've been an advocate of the cutting it up, repurposing, wringing it out, amplification, atomization, whatever you want to call it, since 2016. That's actually the intention that I had of starting the podcast I did at Amarsis, was like, we're going to do this show and we're going to use it in all these ways. And then the reason I started Casted was because that at that time, which is crazy to think about, none of that existed. The cutting it up, repurposing, reusing, people were like, why would you want to do that? And now here we are, and it's everywhere. So I'm absolutely an advocate of that. I think you absolutely can and should capture conversations. I've always said, don't just do audio, do video too, because why would you not? Unless you have some very specific reason why, cool. But generally speaking, do both. Then use it everywhere, because people, as they're scrolling and as they're looking around, as we see, are more likely to be drawn in and engaged if you share little snippets. Those little snippets are applicable to them. They're interested. Hopefully they'll go on to see more. None of this is rocket science. It's important. Do it all. Use the transcript in lots of ways as well. When you have a conversation, you're capturing tons and tons of gold nuggets. Don't keep it all together. Use it in lots of different ways. Distribution. Love to see it. I don't like to see is how everything's just getting turned on to autopilot, and I have a conversation and that's the one human organic thing I do, and then literally I'm just sending it off to the manufacturing mill to chop it all up and never ever touch it again. Again, you're missing the point. You're missing the connection opportunity. You're missing so much goodness and creativity and just opportunity to do some really cool stuff and to connect with a lot of people through that one conversation that you had. So love the distribution. I love the repurposing. I wish that there wasn't so much just send it off to the mill happening, and that people were looking for ways to, yes, be effective and efficient, but to still be really creative with the conversations that are happening. And then you asked about measurement. I want people to focus more on the who than the how many. Like, I'm launching a new show soon. I want the right people listening, and I want them to get a lot out of it. That matters so much more to me than having a million of the wrong people who are just like, I don't know, half engaged. And I think that if everybody slowed down for a hot second, they would realize that's what's best for the show, that's what's best for the brand, that's what's best for the business, is having the right engaging with the content that you're producing.
That hits me pretty deeply. So when I first did my first podcast, this is 2014-15, I literally hired a radio DJ. He had voice talent, but he also had the sound engineering capabilities, and
Nice.
it was his full-time job. And then the last one I did, it became a lot easier. I did a lot of the production myself, and now I had a little bit of help, and now this one I'm doing it all myself. It's definitely changed. It's become, the bar for entry is lower, but I think more importantly, there's like a mind shift. When I was producing it, it was more about the business of it. And hosting it, I was getting goosebumps when we were talking about the human side of it and the connections.
Yeah.
Because I'm just one season in, almost done recording the first season. I think back on the dozen or so conversations that I have, and I'm like, these relationships were real. I feel a connection to these people. And I think you're right to be able to grow that connection to other people who are listening. It's a powerful thing, having people who are so inspired that they reach out to you. So,
It's so true. And that's true for guests, and it's true for the people who, like you said, go ahead and reach out to you because they watched or listened to the show. And I think, again, I want people to just take a second and think as they're scrolling through, this whole thing's about LinkedIn, like as they're scrolling through LinkedIn, as they're posting to LinkedIn, as they're sharing their show on LinkedIn, as they're ringing out their content to share on social media, just think for a second. These are people. You said this earlier in our conversation. You are a human. You are not a part of a machine. These are people, not numbers and fake names. I guess some of them are fake names because bots, but mostly they're people on LinkedIn. Just think, like, how do you want to connect? How do you want to be known? How do you want to engage with these actual human beings? Don't use people. Don't use guests as a means to an end. Don't use the content you create as a means to an end. Don't use connections as a means to an end. Don't use people. Connect with people. And LinkedIn, to me, over the last 20 years, has, if you let it, it's a really powerful and amazing place to do that and to build an audience and to build a network and to build a community of thousands of people that you may never meet in real life and you never ever would have even interacted with without LinkedIn. I don't know, treat it accordingly, right? You're going to get out of it what you put into it. And if you put real, like, some care and some desire to build relationships, you will.
actually, you jumped the gun and got into
I keep doing that.
But no, it's good. It's good. Great minds think alike. You started talking about the impact, and I think I talked a lot about the business impact in the intro. You started getting into the more human impact. You make a good point. I think the people who probably put their humanity into it probably get way more out than people who are playing the game. But I am very curious, all this time that you put into LinkedIn and your network here and your personal brand, were there any unexpected outcomes? Could be positive, could be negative. What surprised you?
Yeah, I had in all of my years as a marketer where I literally have been asked by clients and leaders to make things go viral. Can't we just make it go viral? You know what would be really great, Lindsay? A viral post. Cool. In all of these years, I had one post go viral. It was my own, and I was sitting at the orthodontist with my son, the one who's now taking flight lessons, and he was there for a braces check or something. And I remember my dad was in the hospital, and it was just one of those just really human days. Like, I was being a mom, I was being an adult daughter, and somebody said something somewhere about me being a she-EO. Like, I was leading Casted. I think we had like 50 employees at the time, and it was like girl boss or something. And so I got on LinkedIn, and I wasn't mad. I was just like over it with, hey, I'm not a girl boss. I'm not a she-EO. I'm not any of these cutesy ways to dumb down the fact that I'm the CEO of a really cool company with an incredible team of people doing some really cool stuff. And I also happen to be a woman, which has advantages and disadvantages. And let's stop with the cutesy, like, titles that actually downplay what we're all doing here, and send. And by the time I left the orthodontist and was checking on my dad and I was driving back, it had like millions, and it had gotten picked up by Twitter and Reddit. I was on like the LinkedIn, like idiots of LinkedIn or whatever that thing is, good, bad, and otherwise. Again, it's the things, I'm glad it was for that because it's something I'm really passionate about. Now I'm spending a lot of my time trying to serve founders, especially female founders, especially underrepresented founders, and give them the support that I didn't have. And so I'm glad it was that one. But you talk about unexpected, that was unexpected. All of the strategy and how do we do this? And I had no picture. There was no video with it. I literally typed it on my phone when I was sitting in the waiting room with orthodontist. You just never know. I think to me, it's just further proof and validation that you share authentically, you share continuously, you build real relationships based on who you are, why you're there, and what you stand for. And over time, if you're not trying to game a system, if you're not trying to wing the algorithms, if you're not treating people like a means to an end, those opportunities will come. It's the best possible situation when they come, when it's about who you actually are and what you actually stand for.
Wow, that is an unexpected outcome. But I do think it's a beautiful thing that things have come full circle. Now you're giving back, and I think especially with this new role with Women in Pavilion, I think that's pretty exciting. Yeah. You wonder if you hadn't clicked send that day years ago, would you be known as this advocate for women in the C-suite? And that's exciting.
Imagine if a different post about something that I didn't care about that I published because I felt like I should, or because I was like gaming some system, if that had gone viral, imagine like how much impact that could have had in a direction maybe I didn't want it to go. So it's important to always be like true to who you actually are.
I love that. You've dropped a ton of knowledge here. And I always like to ask the question, because a lot of the people who come on the podcast, they have built very big reputations and successful businesses, and they probably get this almost the same question over and over again. They have a founder come to them at an event and they say, I want to be like you. What are those like first steps that you tell them?
Oh man, partner with the right people. That we've been talking a lot about building relationships and like network. I think the other side of that, the other like corner of that, is be really careful who you partner with. That has such an impact in that moment, and then a rippling effect that is bigger than you can ever imagine. So be really intentional and careful about who you partner with. Be really thoughtful about like what you're doing, who is it for, and why are you doing it? Don't stray away from that. Make sure that the people that you're aligned with are aligned with that, and that it really fuels what you're doing. Who is it for? Why are you doing it? Matters.
Yeah, I would say know your purpose and who you're serving. If you're going to get help, that partnership is definitely key. I'm sure you spent some time on LinkedIn scrolling, learning from other people. Who are you following and learning from these days? And who do you think is doing a great job putting themselves out there?
Oh man, so many. Alina Vandenberg at Chili Piper is fantastic. She and I talk a lot about authenticity, and she's also a mom, and also she's leading this just incredible business, the likes of which I have never been at the helm of. And I just really appreciate how what you read is from her. It's her experiences, it's her life, it's her good, bad, and otherwise moments. So I really like that. And then an organization, Wednesday Women, is pretty fantastic. They exist, Melissa Moody and Leslie Greenwood exist to lift up executive women and get more women on stages and behind mics and in opportunities and partnerships.
We had Melissa on the podcast. She's going to be coming out next week.
Oh, she's so fantastic.
She is great. Yeah.
Yeah, they're wonderful. And again, they exist wholly to just lift up. And so I could keep going on and on, but there's a person in an organization. So there you go.
All right. Wonderful. Those are some great recommendations. And by the way, for Alina, her name comes up a lot. She's doing some amazing things here on LinkedIn. I just love the post that she did. It was a couple of months ago where she had won an award and she brought her son on stage to accept it.
And again, that doesn't mean everyone should do it, but it's very her. And so she did it because it was the right thing for her. That's what makes it really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. She's going to come on the podcast in a month or so. It'll be exciting.
Yay.
All right. So we're rounding the corner to the end of the podcast. Is there anything going on at Human Brands Win that you'd like to share with the audience? A little bird told me that you have a podcast coming. Maybe
I do have a podcast coming out. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of speaking this year about thinking brave. Again, I mentioned earlier, it's the one common thing among the people and the businesses that are able to transcend and break through. It's that they don't focus on what others are doing. They think differently. So I'm talking a lot about what is that mindset? What is that thinking brave mindset? So I'm doing a lot of speaking, And I'm talking with a lot of founders. So I'm launching a show called Actually I Can that talks with founders about all of the times that they were told they couldn't do something or that they shouldn't do something, and they did it anyway. The good, the bad, the otherwise, the wins and the failures, the lessons learned. So yeah, Actually I Can is a show, and I'm very excited about it.
Everybody, make sure to go follow Lindsay and be on the lookout for that new podcast. Ring her bell. You'll get to see all of her updates, and I'm looking forward to that. I think first time I found myself in a founder seat, this podcast. And
you'll have to come do my show. We'll just do.
Oh yeah, that sounds fun. I like that. It's funny. I don't often stop and think about my own story, but that's a topic for
I'll pull it out of you, Brad.
Another time. Everybody, go follow Lindsay. Is there anywhere else where people should check you out? Do you have a newsletter?
Yes, I will. It's coming. So yeah, LindsayTjepkema.com. Tjepkema is a hard word to write. You can also get there by going to humanbrandswin.com or actuallyican.show. It'll all take you to the same place.
All right. Thank you for being so generous with your time and insights. Until next time, let's stay connected. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Brad and Tjepkema on LinkedIn for hot takes and tactical executive branding advice. For the readers in the audience, subscribe to LinkedIn Famous on Substack. And if you really loved this episode, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting platform of your choice. Until next time, stay bold, authentic, and keep on creating.